What is it that people are seeing? Is it a man? An animal? A myth? Or something else? Are they delusional? Are they lying? Some are pastors. Some are law enforcement. Some are military. If they are delusional liars, why do we trust them to lead us to God? To put people in jail and to protect our way of life? Why are their words and actions good enough for that? But when it comes to experiencing something out of the ordinary, something fascinating, something possibly terrifying, they become a fool, a joke, an idiot. Not here. We are the Big Dog T2B. Welcome to the show. Hello everyone, my name is Jack, and welcome to the Big Dog T2B. Tonight we have part 3 of Storytime with Coonbo. Please hit that like button, share our content when and where you can, and leave us a comment below to let us know how we're doing. Also, stop by and visit us at www.bigdogt2b.com, where we have over 200 reports that are free to view. This 3-part series was taken from almost 5 hours of audio. We had a lot of catching up to do. We started about 8 p.m. Eastern Time and we didn't wrap up until almost 1 a.m. We talked about a lot of things. Many of those things were not Bigfoot related and interspaced with a lot of colorful language. We plan to have a series of database shows pretty soon, where we talk about the numbers taken from the reports and what they think they show us. Last of all, I'd like to thank Nate, Tim, and all our listeners for your patience. I edit these things in my spare time, and we strive to produce quality content. The unfortunate outcome is the primary cost of quality is time. And speaking of time, I reckon I've wasted enough of yours. Let's get on with the show.
I don't know if they're a genetic defect or some kind of a result of inbreeding or something. I don't know what these things are. But everywhere that these things show up, the resident type 1s and type 2s leave. They pack up and leave, and they get out of there. I've seen this happen down at a particular place down on the Louisiana-Texas border, near Lake of the Pines. I've seen this happen up here in Iowa, at a particular place in southeast Iowa, and a place that I had been researching since back in 2002. And these things have moved in, and all the other Bigfoot have gone. And there were Bigfoot in there that a family had been habituating for generations, back into the 1800s. And they had all of them named and everything. I mean, I've actually been in contact with these people for over 20 years. And they have a granddaughter that they say can, well, I've seen her do it. She talks to them. And she understands them, or she acts like she does. But their granddaughter came in there one day all upset and crying and told her grandma that the matriarch of that troop of Bigfoot had told her that the bad ones had come and they were going to have to leave. And she was all upset because they were leaving, and they did. They disappeared. The grandma told me about 9 o'clock in the morning, she would always make a bunch of pancakes and carry out there on the deck for them, and they'd come up there and she'd feed them off the deck. And she was sitting there and she'd in the chair, and she was just hoping that they might show back up. And she brought some pancakes out, and she looked up, and there on the trail out of the woods that they always came and went on, she said she thought she saw one of them coming, and as it got closer, she realized that wasn't any of her regular ones. She said it had this baboon-looking head on it. And she said she was instantly felt just an oppressive, evil presence. And she said it came up and it walked up to the side of her deck and said she was scared to move. She didn't know what to do. Said it just stood there and said it glowered at her. And it reached up there and got a pancake or two, ate them, and it stood there and stared at her as it was eating, and then it just turned around and walked off. And she actually called me and wanted to know how to get rid of them. For a long time, she wouldn't tell me why suddenly they wanted to get rid of them. I had been warning her about habituating those things. I thought she was trying to get rid of the ones that they'd been habituating for generations. So I told her the usual things to do. Well, the next I heard from her, her husband had died of a heart attack. And then about 2 months after that, she called me and she had moved. And she said once her husband died, she said these things were coming up there and trying to get in her house. And she said one night they tore through the wall of her basement, got in her basement, and were beating on the floor. And she ran out and jumped in her car and left and never came back. And the house is sitting there to this day with all of her stuff still in it. She gave me the key to the house. I've been in there and offered to go get it, bring her stuff. She said, no, I don't want any of that stuff, And she took a few things with her, but the house is still sitting there empty. And when I went in the house, they had broken up through the floor and gotten up into the thing and, torn up a bunch of stuff. But these things, they're evil. Now, just in the last week, they've shown up at another place where a friend of mine lives just south of here, a guy that I research with here locally, and they're in his area, and they're leaving 3-toed tracks all around on his property.
Have you ever looked at ectrodactyly? It's a condition in humans, ostrich feet.
I have, yes. As a matter of fact, there is a tribe in Africa or maybe on an island somewhere where they have been climbing trees with their toes splayed out for so long that it's like it's become a genetic defect or something, or their feet are permanently deformed. But I don't know if they're born with normal feet or not. I would think they probably were. But yes, I have heard of what you're talking about. Sometimes people are born with their fingers webbed together and toes webbed together and stuff like that. I think these 3-toed ones, I think they actually have 5 toes. Some of them are stuck together through some kind of a genetic defect. That's what I believe.
I believe it's possibly a result of inbreeding.
I think it is too. I think it is a result of inbreeding. I'm in contact with a number of guys that go out to these oil rigs and pump the tanks out at these oil wells. And I've known about these places. I first researched them back in the early 2000s, but they're still there where they've got these baboon-headed ones that are out in that area, and these drivers are scared half to death of them. Regular Bigfoot doesn't bother them, but these baboon-headed ones, they say they're evil. Universally, everybody that I've talked to that has seen these things all feel the same way. There's becoming more and more of them. It was very rare that I would hear about them, but now I hear about them all the time in new places that they haven't been before. I've got them in 2 different places within 2 hours of where I live. Don't know what to think about that. Troy and I have talked a number of times about how these things, all of the Bigfoot creatures, the 1s, 2s, and 3s, and I don't know about the canid type, the type 4s, the true dog men, but we do know that the types 1, 2s, and 3s all have strong effects on electrical and electronic equipment. They can suck batteries down like crazy. Some of you may have heard me tell the story of a researcher friend of mine, a guy named Mike Stuckey. He and I used to do a lot of recording and stuff together. Mike had a lot of really nice digital recording equipment and such. And he had a bunch of really good microphones, the bionic ears and things like that. And we would go out and set up and sit there and listen. And he was one of the first guys I knew that had a pretty decent night vision scope, not a rifle scope, just a handheld scope you could hold it, look through. We had a deal where I had some Bigfoot that were coming up around my house on a really regular basis. Just a lot of vocals and stuff going on around there. So he made a trip all the way down to Mississippi, and we were going to record it. I told him, be sure and bring fresh batteries and everything. Well, dadgummit, we got out there one of the first nights, and there was an old tractor shed, or as they say up here in the Midwest, a machine shed, where you park your tractors and your equipment on the old farm there where I was living, diagonal across the road from my house, about 80, 90 yards from my house. And one of them had walked up and was standing sort of looking around the corner of that tractor shed, and he was doing owl hoots. Well, the dadgum owl got to answering him. Then I would hoot back at him, and then the booger would hoot, and then the owl would hoot, then I would hoot. And so Mike was trying to record this. All of a sudden, the recorders, they just quit working. And we were easing up closer and closer to the booger standing there by the tractor shed. And we were within, 35, 40 yards of it. And the recorders just quit. And I got pissed. I showed my rear end. I really talked sort of ugly to Mike. And I fussed at him. Dadgummit, I told you to bring new batteries. I told you I'd pay you for the batteries. And I said, Dadgummit, to hear you brought these recorders up here and they run for 5 minutes and then crap out. He said, I put new batteries in them. Well, I was fussing and everything. So I said, come on. And we just turned around and walked back to the house. I said, get in the truck. We got in the truck. And where I lived, it was like almost 30 miles into Booneville, Mississippi, nearest place where you could buy batteries. We drove all the way into Booneville, Mississippi to the Walmart. And I went in there and bought 2 great old big packs of AA's and AAA batteries. And I said, now we got good batteries. So we went back there and I put all new batteries in all of Mike's gear. I was ticked, and Mike, he was trying to tell me, he said, I just did this. He said, I just put brand new batteries in these things. And sure enough, as I pulled them out, I looked at the dates and compared to the dates of the batteries I just bought. They were then within a month or so of each other. And some of them were even the same month and year. And so we go back out there. Of course, by that time, the booger was gone that had been there by the tractor shed. So we go down in another area, and my gosh, we get into the most unbelievable plethora of vocalizations. And Mike was about ready to jump out of the truck and run. He was listening. He had a jack plugged into the aux output on the amp that he was running his bionic ear into. And it sounded like that they were fixing to jump on the roof of the truck and about to scare him to death. And so we're recording all this stuff, and I'm sitting there holding this recorder that I just put new batteries in, and it died right there in my hand. I'm like, what the crap? He said, I told you. So I've apologized to Mike probably 100 times, and every time I see him or hear him anywhere or come across him or see him online, I apologize again. Every time I see him, I apologize again. But I still feel bad about the way I treated him, because he had done his absolute best and done exactly what he said he did. But every time we got close to those boogers, the batteries in those recorders would die within less than 5 minutes. And since then, I've seen that happen with just time and time again. My dadgum FLIR, I've had 2 or 3 times where the batteries would be sucked down in my FLIR within, I've had it fully charged up and everything doing good, and I get close on in a weird situation, and my battery is dead in less than 10 minutes. Again, anybody that spent much time out there, it's happened to them time and time again.
Me and Jay would be out together a time or two, and one thermal would run down quick, and the other one would stay charged, or vice versa. It never was the same one.
Huh.
And I would always accuse him of not charging his till it happened to mine.
Yeah.
and I keep mine charged.
Yeah.
But I've never had both of them run down at one time.
Huh. I'll be.
You said something earlier about the different types, not interbreeding.
Yeah.
When I had these two types here, I never saw any evidence whatsoever that they had anything at all to do with each other.
Right.
These type threes did not go to Newsom Sinks. They
Huh.
didn't mess around down there. The type ones were in Newsom Sink, that was theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I never seen any evidence of these others going down there.
Right. Well, it's like on my farm in Alabama. We've got type ones on the farm in Alabama. You go just right up the river just a little bit towards Town Creek, and that's where you got a whole bunch of canid type fours, the true dog men. Now, you talk to the native folks that live down there around the land between the lakes area, they'll tell you that since those canids, those type fours started moving in there, the true dog men, that the regular Bigfoot, type ones or type twos, that they're moving out of the area. And that's why the dog men are so prevalent in the north end of the land between the lakes, is because the type ones and type twos have gotten the heck out of there. And the things that I've seen happen just right around here, like up here in southeast Iowa on that family's property, where they had been habituating the type twos that live up there for generations, and all of a sudden they up and leave, and the type threes show up here south of me on this other researcher's property. He told me here several weeks ago, he said, he said, I don't know what's going on. He said, I hadn't seen hide in their hair or anything out of my local bookers down here. He said, they're very active this time of the year. He said, I don't know what's going on. He says, like they've left. And then the next thing, last week, I started hearing from him. He said, man, I got some bad crap going on down here. He said, we've had something up here messing around the house when I'm at work, and the wife's here by herself. It's got her scared half to death, and the kids are scared half to death. He said, I went outside, and he said, I've heard some things. I just felt an overwhelming evil presence. One of their dogs has gone missing. Their wife had a very expensive full-size dachshund. It got nabbed. It's been gone now for over a week. And then he just here a few days ago, he's found a bunch of three-toed tracks back in the woods behind his house. And he sent pictures of them. And I mean, they're big tracks too. Big old tracks.
One of the tracks I found across the road, my grandson found it early in the year, last year, was a 24-inch track. That's the biggest track I've ever found.
Wow. Wow, wow.
This one was 24 from the heel to the end of the big toe.
Uh-huh.
And you could see all the toes.
Wow.
We were walking along, and it was just a little bit off trail, and he found it, and he turned just as pale as a sheet. He said, what is that? I said, well, son, that's what we're out here looking for. And I told him, I said, that's a big track. And
Yeah.
I wear 13, almost 14 in the
Yeah.
track. I put both my feet heel to toe,
Yeah.
and I have my boots on. It's almost as long as both my feet with boots on.
I found a 23-inch track on the back of my farm one time down next to the creek, down there below the bat cave. You remember where I showed you that was?
Mm-hmm.
Straight down the hill below the cave, I found a 23-inch track there on that creek bank, but it had a little bit of slippage in it. That was a left foot track. It was 23 inches. Right foot track, he had stepped down and stepped flat down, and that track was 22 inches, and it didn't have any slippage in it at all. There was actually 3 tracks in a row down through there, but I've never seen an honest track longer than 22 inches that didn't have some slippage in it.
But this one didn't have any slippage.
Right.
It was straight up 24 inches.
I know that they got to be ones out there that's got 24-inch tracks or better, because, I saw that big 12-footer type 1 out there in East Texas. I know that thing's got to throw a track that's at least 2 feet long. Got to. Wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't 27 inches long.
This track, it was almost one of those take your breath things, because I was not expecting to see, and I've seen tracks before, once you see so many 16, 17-inch track, you think, well, that's a 16 or that's a 17-inch track, and big deal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've never even cast a track. This track was not defined enough to cast.
Yeah.
You could see the toes where it stepped off, but it was hard ground. It hadn't been very long since it had been made.
Yeah.
It had rained earlier that morning, so that track was made sometime shortly before we were there.
Mm-hmm.
Not very long before. I told him, I said, let's ease on back to the house. You know how I'm about carrying somebody with me. If I don't know that I can protect them,
Yeah.
something with a 24-inch track I wasn't real sure about.
Right.
But I was impressed.
Yeah. Thinking about one time I got chased by one, and it was keeping up with my truck up to a little over 50 miles an hour, running out in through cutover. We were in the middle of about a 3,500 acre pine plantation. This is the one that we'd pulled up right in the middle of a square section of land, and the southwest quarter section had just been logged off, that clear cut that summer. And then the top's all windrowed and everything. And man, it's coyote tracks all over the place out there. And behind us, the northwest quarter section was growed up in that cutover, probably 8 years old or so. It cut over about 12 feet tall, something like that. And then the southeast quarter section had cut over in it that was only a couple, 3 years old. It was the pine, the seedlings were up about waist high. The briars were just starting to come up, but you could still walk through there. And then the northeast quarter section was probably 4 or 5 years old, something like that. It had gotten already pretty thick, but it was not as thick as that one that we got, that one charged us through. And we could see that it was leaving the wake through the thing, through the stuff. When I finally got my truck started and started hauling butt out of there as fast as we could go, that thing was chasing us. When I got up above about between 55 and 60 and opened up some distance on it, I'd gone a half a mile straight west, and the next section of ground straddled a big old hollow, big deep hollow, or almost like a canyon, steep sided, and the road went down, and it didn't have switchbacks in it, but it had a pretty good curve in it going down, but they'd come in there with a dozer or a road grader and cut water turnouts across the road so that the water wouldn't wash right down the road and erode it. So I couldn't go very fast going down that hill, and that damn thing caught up with us and came flying out of the pines, that cut over and everything behind us, ran across the road and ran into the cut over on the opposite side of the road, the south side of the road. And I had to slow down, got to go through a low water crossing. It was full of a bunch of cantaloupe sized to basketball sized rocks. And I had to slow down. Didn't want to bust the oil pan out of the truck or bust a tire or break something in the front end. And as I was crossing the creek, the thing starts throwing stuff at us. And then once I got across the creek, I had to pass within about 15, 20 feet of the dadgum thing again. And it started chasing me. But fortunately, you got it from that point, you got about a mile and a half or so of, once you get to the top of up out of that deep draw, it's fairly straight. And dude, I was flying down through there. I was doing 70 miles an hour or better. And it never caught back up with us. But I've often wondered how in the world it ran that fast through that cutover. I mean, because it was obvious it was running a lot faster trying to keep up with the truck than it was when it originally charged us. I never had thought about the thing dissolving or being able to just run right through it without moving things. I can't get my head around that. But I think about the first time old Sammy Armstrong and I got chased out of AP Road. We had 3 of them chase us out of there, and they chased us the whole length of actual AP Road itself. And once we got out onto the pavement, they chased us for nearly a half a mile, paralleling us through that cutover. Every time you'd come to a little gap in it, you could see them again. That makes me think again about those two incidences, how they kept up with us at those speeds through that. If there wasn't some kind of weird stuff going on that we just don't understand. Like the police officer decided they said, they dissolved into that thicket.
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't like to think about that sort of thing because, like I've said before, I've got my comfort zone, what I feel comfortable believing.
Yeah,
Now,
me too.
I like to think they're primates. I like to think they're real as we are. Because
So
if it's
too.
real and it eats and it sleeps and it breathes, I
Yeah.
can kill it. If I allow myself to entertain those other thoughts, then I've got to consider the fact that, can I kill it? Or am I really that outclassed?
I know for sure that you can kill them. I mean, I know they bleed, and I've talked to too many people that have shot them. I've heard it from law enforcement agencies. I've heard it from some impeccable sources that you can kill them. But I'm just wondering, are there circumstances where you can't kill them? If they can dissolve
I don't
into,
know.
I know this is crazy.
I'm a firm believer that a 30 caliber in the hand of a competent marksman can kill most anything.
Well,
and then you get to thinking about, okay, it dissolves into trees or into a thicket.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I don't know.
Are we that outclassed? Are we that far behind? I don't know.
I'm just wondering if the people that have killed them just got lucky and did it before they had a chance to do a change or something. I don't know how this works. The more I learn about these things, the more questions I got. Just
me too. I said that a bunch.
Yeah, it's.
Well, here's another perspective on that. The legends surrounding Native Americans. Those legends don't exist anymore. But when Native Americans functioned in that environment every day, they were villainized, they were legendary, they were demonized in some circumstances because of their ability to function in the natural environment in a way that the people of the time didn't understand. One of the shortcomings that we have in a lot of things is that we take our understanding of abilities, communication, reaction to stimulus, all of these things, and we measure it with our box, with our ability. Now, you can't take a human, strip them naked, and put them in a natural environment with very few exceptions of distance between the equator and the pole. There's a narrow strip in there where humans can exist naked and not die. And that's just based on the thickness of our skin. That's one element. That's a part of the equation that, at least for me personally, I have to keep pulling that back out and sticking that into my reality. To say, I'm dealing with something, this is their home, rain, snow, sun, drought, famine, infection, disease, everything about it. And this is my outlook on everything, deer, rabbits, birds, whatever. They function here, and they do it every day, all day. And I don't. So the fact that things, and then we do other odd things where we superimpose thought processes, morality, value systems. We superimpose that on each other. Humans don't share that stuff. We think that we do, but we don't. Like Nate, I don't like to consider these things because it would affect my life and the way that I operate and the way that I go and do things when I step out my door here in a way that I'm not willing to do. But counterbalancing that, I say, well, this is a being, this is something that is, if it exists, I have to say that because of me, that is comparable in intelligence between the higher primates and us, with physical abilities and size that would surpass anything in the known zoological record, and deal with it like that.
I know exactly what you're saying. If you've got something out there that can walk through an impenetrable thicket without disturbing anything, and assuming that video, it was an old video that I saw of this thing going through that fence. Let's assume that it's not a hoax. You got something that could walk right through a chain link fence, a steel fence. Our whole sense of security has just been negated. It's gone. The sad thing is, if they wanted us dead, we'd all be dead. The human race would have been eradicated aeons ago if they wanted us dead. Because none of our homes that we live in would survive one of those things pissed off, wanting to get in and get you. Matter of fact, my house, I got cedar siding on my house. And if I really wanted in my house and just drywall on the inside and I couldn't get in, I'd just grab a hold of that cedar siding and rip it off and kick a couple of times and I'd walk right through the wall. I think about the time that one was up on my deck turning my doorknob on the back door of the mobile home the company had rented for me. And if that thing had really wanted in, it could have yanked the whole dadgum door right out of the side of that mobile home. I've got these nice Anderson atrium doors here with armor glass in them and everything that you can hit these things with a fairly heavy hammer and the glass won't break. Got triple locks, triple bolt locks in them, you know. Well, yeah, they'd keep out you'd have to really, 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 really want in this house to get in through those things. But a booger would walk up here and just snatch the whole damn assembly right out of the side of the house if they wanted us.
That poses a question to a story you told a little bit ago and this confuses me. I wonder, are they limited to what they can do? Is it a portal thing? Because you were talking about they broke into that lady's basement and they eventually tore through the floor.
Right.
If they could do this at will, they would need to do that.
You've heard the story that I got called down to southwest Mississippi to an old plantation down there. And I interviewed the guy that called me down there. Had worked on that plantation since the 1930s. He started out plowing fields and stuff down there with a team of mules. And he was running, nice big modern tractors when I interviewed him in the 1990s. He was the first one that ever told me about seeing this shimmering and like a column of shimmering heat waves. It was only in this one area of the plantation. It was a 20-acre field next to a little small river. In this one field and one field only, ever since he'd been working there, since back in the 1930s, periodically, he would see, usually somewhere along the eastern half of the field, this column of shimmering light. He said it was like shimmering heat waves would appear and a Bigfoot would walk out of it. Or they would see one walking out across the field. It would just fade out. It would fade away. And I interviewed 3 or 4 people down there that had worked on that plantation for decades that had seen this back there in that same area. And I very specifically questioned it because the first guy that called me down there told me that the only place he'd ever seen this was in this one field. And I specifically asked them, where all had they seen it? Well, only in this at one field. So, I don't know. You go out to, what's that yuppie town north of Phoenix? Sedona, Arizona. And they got all these places marked out all around the area there where they have these energy vortices. Supposedly. I remember we were down there back in the 1990s and down there and had rented us some Jeeps, and here we came riding out across this big old rock formation deal, and there was this guy out there in this contorted position out there on this rock. This is right after daylight, and we came up on top of it. This guy's out there in all this weird position, and he starts yelling at us. He gets all pissed off and because we screwed up his vortex. We screwed up his energy vortex. And my wife and I were out there back 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I took her down there and she drove. She didn't believe me when I was telling her about these energy vortexes there that these people think are around Sedona. So I drove her back there where this place was, where we had disturbed that guy. And you go there now, they got all these reflective metal mirrored streamers hanging off of trees and stuff around the area and all this crap. And you can get a map that shows where they are. And and the people that live out there, they believe it. It's not an arguable subject to them. I mean, it's just a fact of life. But, you know, the rest of us, you know, normal people, we laugh about it. But, or what we think is normal.
You know what's really going to disturb me, don't you?
What's that?
What's really going to disturb me is if at some point I find out that all those people were right and I was wrong. That's really going to mess me up.
Yeah.
I will be ruined from that day on.
Yeah. You know, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. And like I said, it's, I do not consider myself of the woo persuasion, but, you know, we're of the age that it's time we start talking about some of this stuff that we've kept under our hats for decades, you know. That's the whole reason for this weird ass show that we're doing. But
well, it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. And like I said, if you do this long enough, you're going to run into stuff that you cannot explain through anything that normal people understand.
For a long time, I had this philosophy. If I couldn't explain it, it never happened.
Right.
I've got over that, but for years.
Yeah. It's very hard for me as a ex-NASA and Army Missile Command engineer and has worked on all kind of stuff to get my head around this stuff. But, you know, I often have people ask me, hey, did you ever see anything, any alien stuff, anything like that? No, I never saw any aliens. Our government does have aircraft out there, quite a number of aircraft out there that they've never admitted that they have. I can tell you that for a fact.
Fellas, it's almost 12 o'clock.
Well, I guess we better get off of here. We need to get over.
Well, thank you, everybody. This wraps up our first series of Storytime with Coonbo. Coonbo is slated for our database series, where we cover how to find and detect these things by the numbers, or how to avoid them if that's not your thing. Please remember, if you decide to step off the pavement, if you decide to step off the trail and get back into places where people normally don't go, you need to be mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared for what you may encounter. Take care. God bless. We love you. And until next time, have a good evening.